All right, welcome everybody to our June book club, Arcadia Book Club edition. And tonight we are very excited to have Bryan Christy with us, the author of In the Company of Killers. James, do you want to talk about how you and Bryan met and how we came to know about this fantastic book?
Sure. We I was on my honeymoon in Patagonia, in the southern part of Chile, and the first morning that we were hiking, I heard a couple behind me talking about books, I think. And so I was, just as I described in the newsletter, I am a bit of a nosy Parker when people are talking about books. So I sort of fell back and started listening. And then I mentioned that I owned a bookstore and blah, blah, blah. And we kept talking. And it turned out that not only was Bryan a fan of some of the people that I liked, and I a fan of the ones he liked, but that he was writing this novel and was struggling with the final version of it, right? Weren't you? Yeah. And he was mad at his editor, and led to lots of good dinner table conversation, and that's that. One thing led to another. We kept in touch, and the book is here. And I want to show you my beautiful copy that Bryan sent me. It's extremely rare. So, but we do have somewhere. Bryan has a copy of the actual book.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karen.
We'll have copies. All right, that's good. But so it's a real treat to have Bryan with us, and that way you don't have to listen to me talk. You can just listen to him talk. But I did want to start off just by kind of maybe Bryan, if you wouldn't mind recounting just your journey to become a novel. What was the impulse behind, turning from what you've been doing, which I think most people know by now, and or maybe you could just give us a little bit of that, but mostly the sense of why, because I know you've written a couple of really nice pieces recently, about sort of the role of this kind of writing and how this kind of writing can really make an impact on the world if you do it in a way that has the right sort of aspiration. And so could you just chat a little about why you felt that fiction was the best way to go for what you want to accomplish?
Sure. And I'm delighted to be here with you again, James, and this gang, many of the faces I recognize from our last adventure. From the time I was a little kid, I wrote stories and wanted to be a novelist to the extent I knew what that meant. But I didn't know how to do it, was afraid to do it, and so took all the practical steps that I came up with. Instead of launching into a career as a writer, I went to law school, which is where a lot of people who want to be writers kind of give up their dreams and make that practical choice. And I loved that. I was a Washington lawyer for a number of years, and I thrived in that environment, but it wasn't me. It wasn't the novelist in me. And I quit. My father had gotten sick, and that kind of made me focus on what was important in life. And we've talked about that. And I quit the law firm, and I decided I was going to write a novel. And I thought, John Grisham's done it. A lot of lawyers have done it. How hard can it be? And it turns out it's really hard. And even when you've done it, it's hard to get an agent, and then it's hard to find a publisher. And my circumstance was was unique in the sense that when I finally found an agent for my book, my meeting with her was scheduled for September 11th, 2001 in New York. And so I was up there on the 10th, and on the 11th, instead of having my morning meeting to sell that first novel, I was a volunteer at what became Ground Zero, as close as I could get. And that was, I was motivated by that experience, by that day. I wanted to do something constructive with my life, and I didn't think imagining stories was valuable anymore. I thought, okay, I reached out to some contacts in the CIA, and I reached out to some contacts in journalism, and I decided whichever came through first, I was going to go with. And journalism came through, and I went to work for Geographic, and I did. I was able to do, with their backing, some extraordinary investigations around the world. But all the while thinking, as I'm writing my stories, like Tom Wolfe did, how do I bring a novelist technique to these nature stories? And these are not, to me, they weren't nature stories anymore, they were crime stories. And so how do I bring the criminal narrative techniques as well as criminal investigative techniques to these problems? And I got to, I did a lot with elephants in Africa and China and rhinos, and it was a wonderful period. But the real challenge of my life was, can I do the novel, and can I harness or let loose my creative instincts?
Can I interrupt?
Fiction.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes, please.
That when you read your pieces in National Geographic, they don't sound like other people's pieces in National Geographic. They sound, so you succeeded in what you were accomplishing because they read in a very different and much more personal and intense way than most of the writing that I read in National Geographic.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was very fortunate. I brought I had a very strong sense of, kind of the old Norman Mailer, Hunter S. Thompson, Tom Wolfe. I mean, I love the new journalism guys of a past era, and National Geographic is cutting edge in photography, but in the written word, it was kind of old school, and they were, in part, that's because they were dealing with animals, and when it came to crime against animals, you have to be really careful, because if you kill it, these are about animals being killed, and people won't read about that. So they avoided that by focusing on stories about the setting, grand environmental stories, and with great pictures, and then they'd tell you, or they'd occasionally show you a dead animal or something. But they were very afraid, as most people would be, to venture into stories that talked about animals being killed. And I said, great, I completely agree with you. These are crime stories. Let's focus on the criminals. And so let's go after these people. And they had never done that before. And that's what I brought to Geographic. And then, over a period of years, I really felt like, okay, I've proved the model. This is how you can tell stories to make a difference. I've done some of the bigger species that have the power to make it, to bring elephants, for example, to bring people to these stories. I can see the end point for me as a investigative journalist. Now's the time to try my hand at the novel. And I was wiser at that point. I'd seen things that had me as upset as I had been about animals being poached, bigger things, human stories, stories involving espionage and government corruption and things. So I really felt like the world had conspired to say either now or never.
Yeah, that's great. So you created this guy, Tom Clay, who's, as I've written before, you just kind of fall the guy just makes such sense. And at first I thought, okay, I know this guy. But then as the book went on, he just became so sort of human and flawed in such a different way than many of the characters in these, in particularly in sort of espionage people. It just became so personal that I just thought, about halfway through the book, I thought, oh God, he's not going to kill the. Oh, you've all read the book, right? He's not going to kill the guy off. I mean, I hope that there's going to be more with this guy, but I did come across. There's two things I just wanted. I asked you if you wanted to read, and we both agreed that sometimes reading is not so great for people. But would you mind if I read one paragraph that I thought
Sure.
Really, just such a great way to sort of fill in who the character is. For those of you, this is the first kind of conversation that Tom Clay is having with the man who is the head of the National Geographic stand-in in the book. And this is when he's sort of persuading him to also work for the CIA. And first of all, Bryan, I have to say, there's a sentence here. It's on page 94 in your hymnals, if you want to turn to that. The boss is saying, no, son, I'm trusting you. If you should turn this down, you'd know my secret. You'd know the agency's secret. I'm trusting that whatever your choice, you are a patriot. Clay shook his head. Where I come from, what you're talking about is a rat. And then you give Edie, is that how you pronounce it, Edie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The perfect sentence for a man, I think, of his situation. He says, that's a perspective you'll have to reconcile. I just love that he just says, that's not our problem. You have to mix with this somehow. But this is the thing I really wanted to read to everybody, because it's such a great way to fill in the background of a character and make you wonder about him. And so, Clay says the obvious thing. So why me? Why give me this golden opportunity? A smile wriggled loose from the corners of Edie's mouth. Why you? Okay, Tom, let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? Here's why you make sense. You're a loner. You make acquaintances easily, but you can't form lasting relationships. You're emotionally damaged owing to a tragic incident involving your mother that we needn't recount, but some people, like you, know how to use the wounded parts of themselves to recognize wounds in others and turn them to advantage. You drink too much, but you're not a drunk. Your father, Jack, ended up a senior member of the Scalise mob, even though he's not Italian. He remains in prison, though he could certainly cut himself a deal. Nicky Scalise offered to bring you into the family. You didn't accept, but you could have. The underworld is in your DNA. You break rules frequently, but you have a sense of justice. You have, I believe, the need to do some real good, atone, correct the past. We all make mistakes, but rarely do we have the opportunity to counter their weight so profoundly. Thanks to the work I've given you, you're well-traveled now and reasonably well-connected. You're a superb writer, and that's a cover I need. You're a good criminal investigator instinctively. I can make you better. You handle unexpected adversity. Will that do? And it's just, you just feel like all of a sudden you've got this full view of this guy you've already come to like. And then you carry all of that forward, and you keep wondering what happened to his mom, and blah blah blah, and these things slowly get brought out, I think, deftly throughout the rest of the book. But more importantly, I would argue, and this is because I live for years directing plays, I lived by my ears. That dialogue just feels absolutely right. And when you told me you were a writer and you were writing your novel, 95% of me thought, oh boy. And the 5% of me thought, oh crap, I hope it's good.
You might be reversing those percentages, but okay.
I mean, I just thought, and then when I read the book, and I was reading, I was texting or emailing to Bryan, every 50 pages about various things. And when I finished, it was late at night, and I just all I wrote was one sentence to him. I said, Bryan, this is an effing good book. And it's just, it's really, I just think it's a terrific book. But what's great about it is that you seem to want to correct and make, in other words, you want to do some real good, and by writing a character and putting him in this world where he can try to do good, it's just such a great idea. Okay, that's all I wanted to bring up, because I thought maybe that would embarrass you in the right way. So I'm going to open it up to whoever wants to ask questions. Wait, everybody keeps shifting around. I've lost everybody. Does anyone have a start-off question for Bryan about anything? I mean, I've got lots of things to ask, but I'd rather you guys talk. Larry, from wherever.
Well, my favorite passage was on page 88. Germany made ill by her lesser races, Jews, a disease, gypsies, an infestation. He used language to justify his savagery. It wasn't murder, it was cleansing. Immigrants weren't human beings, they were invasive species. Words made all the difference. And I'm sure this was written a long time ago, but certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of the other current politicians come to mind, and with what's going on the border. So that just was so powerful to me and so relevant to what's happening today. I love the way, Bryan, you infuse politics and media, and so relevant to everything that's going on today.
Larry, thank you very much. I wrote that. Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't on my radar at the time, but Donald Trump certainly very much was. And I wrote those scenes. I mean, I did my research on Nazi Germany for just a few paragraphs. I did quite a lot, but then I laid it over. And the only reason it was relevant to me for this book was because of what's happening in this country now. And I really wanted to underscore that words do matter and our choice of words matters. And I was hearing every day from Fox News and right-wing politicians coded language. And I really wanted to remind people that there's history to that, and there are repercussions to that we all need to keep in mind.
That's great. Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, that's great, Larry, that you brought that up. But it doesn't feel, the beauty of it, Bryan, is that it doesn't feel tacked on.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. But Jen, my wife, and I talk about it every single day. How do you, I mean, to me, there are only a few stories that should be told in America right now. Race is one. Maybe global warming, some version of global warming. But these big existential questions, the violence in America, gun violence. There are only a few stories you should, as a writer, be spending your time on. The rest is entertainment. If you want to do entertainment, that's fine. But you, to me, are not a writer. You are something it's fine. It's just, I don't like you taking up my space. But if you're gonna, I grew up in a funeral home. You only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and you ought to be using that time. If you have something you're passionate about, for me it's writing, and for me it's using that writing to some useful end, in the way George Orwell did, or our mutual friend John le Carré. I say friend in terms of meaning that we both respect his storytelling. He could have done what most spy thriller writers do and just take a kind of Rambo approach to espionage, and done really well and entertained people and things. But he took on, there was from the very beginning, from Spy Who Came In From the Cold, but MI6, he was critical of his own spy agency at a time when that was not popular. And he was equally critical of the Russians and East Germans. And that was really important. And to do it in that genre that celebrates one-sidedness, and that's what makes me excited about this genre. There's so much power in it that's untapped. So I'm excited about it.
That's a great point. Other questions from people? Yes, Mary Pat.
So I have a question. As a writer, and this has to do with how do you keep your story in your head through the whole process? So I fell in love with the book in the very beginning when you were talking about the chicken and dog routine. And I was reading it kind of going, all right, I get it. I wonder why. I couldn't figure out why you were spending time on it. And then you as the reader, then you get to the end of that chapter and Bernard is killed. And I went, oh, that was the chicken and dog routine. That was a presage of what's happening now. And with the killing. And I just I went, oh, this is really smart literature. And so, then it was like, I went, oh, okay, I got to keep going. But where my question comes in is then one gets to the very end of the book when he rescues the dog and he has that moment of, oh yeah, this reminds me of that of that dog way back on page 1. So how do you is that a conscious choice that you make? I mean, I can't imagine you started out at the beginning of the book going, I want to take this and use it at the end. Or maybe you do, but that's just what I'm curious about is how that process happens.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. I'm going to be completely honest. I'll tell you how it came about. I wrote that scene without the dog, the opening chapter, and I felt like because of what's going to happen to Bernard in a very short period of time, you as the reader needed to connect with him quickly, and you needed to connect with their relationship quickly. And you couldn't do that. I couldn't tell you they were close. And I couldn't, they needed to do a lot physically. They were going on this anti-poaching operation. And I thought, how can I compress this? And animals, particularly pets, offer a good surrogate for bringing emotional intensity, it's the reason I began with the elephant poaching operation. Animals can bring emotional content subconsciously to the page or to the story very, very quickly. So that dog that scene emerged as a whole in my mind, but it was very late. I was well into the book, but just not pleased with that. With okay, you didn't care enough about Bernard to have him killed, and so I was thinking, well, he can't die now. I need you to really care about him. And I thought, oh, I can kind of double up on your caring for him by bringing this dog and this relationship, and you can see the two of them talking together about something else, which I thought would bring some more emotional weight to the story. And then the final scene, or that final moment, I'll tell you, I cried when that. It still does it to me when that dog jumps in the car. That just came to me as this is why it's so I'm so happy to be writing the novel now, because fiction allows you to unleash the subconscious and your imagination and stuff. And that, I don't know where the hell that comes from, but it's so satisfying when ideas like that appear on the page. I don't really, but I am constantly, I do think in terms of technique, I could draw it if we had, I think of story, if you took a single line and drew a vase. So it starts to the one side and it kind of goes up and then down into the bowl of the vase, and then it comes up and then it comes close to the neck and down. That's story to me. That's how you write a novel. So you start over here and you're going to end over here, but they're pretty parallel. And as I'm going down into the bowl of the narrative, I'm thinking as I'm coming out of the main conflict, how do I bring this to echo things that happened in the beginning? And so I was thinking, can I bring the dog in, or and then I saw that I made Edie. Of course, Edie breeds these dogs, and what an asshole that he would, if he kicked a dog, as he does. That's, again, animals are very useful in very quickly telling you something about a person's character and how you interact with an animal. And then I thought, oh, okay, Clay could rescue that dog. So I was really satisfied with that.
Yeah, it worked.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. This is Charlotte Smith. I was immediately drawn into the book because of the animal poaching. So that's verification of what you said, that animals can be a way to engage the reader. And so those opening scenes really got me into the book. And of course, I was expecting the book to be a lot about that, which it was. But I must say, even despite the horrific scenes of the animal poaching, I was most horrified by the scene in the auditorium of the drones flying around and flashing out people's IDs and pictures. And I wondered if you could explain where that idea came from. I noticed, the tie back to the technology used to tag and trace the animals. But what else have you been seeing that obviously seems to bother you about the use of technology? Can you expand on the things that you're worried about, and where that concern comes from?
Thank you very, very much. Yeah, I really wanted to get away from, I really just wanted to use animals in a couple of places, and I knew, my bio would appear with the Nat Geo stuff, and so it would be consistent. But what really motivated me to write the story was some of the things you're alluding to, this surveillance technology, and a number of places around the world that companies that want to advance surveillance technologies that will be used against Uyghurs or will be used against American populations, use animals as a cover. So they will donate their technology to anti-poaching operations as a kind of Trojan horse to advancing and greenwashing what they really want to sell as surveillance technology for humans. And the question was, how do you make that personal to people? How do you do it without preaching? How do you make the reader experience it in real time? And I thought, okay, what if drones came, flying at you, sitting in an auditorium, and then started flashing your ID, and this was taken, like the information that they were flashing and things was based on more of this book than you might think is taken from reality. And this is technology that is being used in Africa, things that we would never accept here are being used because everyone is a poacher, right? Everyone's a potential poacher. And so these technologies are on trees and in drones and at gates into parks, and will bio ID you. And I have, that's just one level of things that we are doing, and kind of bleeding heart people Americans are endorsing that they would never consider accepting in this country. And so I wanted to, that was one of the drivers for this book, was to expose that and kind of show, how would you like it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Nancy?
I probably, unlike some of you, I'm like kind of a Africa I am very involved with, I go on safari almost every year. I'm involved with the African Wildlife Foundation. I'm involved with African conservation, and I have always loved following Bryan's work in National Geographic. So I'm kind of a groupie in a different kind of way, I guess. And I was so excited to read this book. And some of the stuff that I found, I loved it. And some of the things I found so interesting was that, to me at least, I don't know if it's really true, that some things felt kind of inspired by, like Cyril has to be Cecil, right? I mean, he's not Cecil, but he's based on this iconic Zimbabwean lion who was poached, and not poached, but killed. Anyway, but I love the book so very, very much. And I also thought that it was not reminiscent, but I kept thinking, I hope there's many, many, many more coming up, like a Wilbur Smith kind of ongoing kind of thing. And I really don't have a question. I just wanted to say that because it's wonderful, Bryan.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Yeah, I have a 2-book deal just to start with Clay, and really enjoying his adventure. I'm writing the second one now. I won't say much about it, but yeah, I'm very excited about taking things I learned about the process of creating a story, creating Clay. Clay is now formed. I mean, he's named Clay for a reason, and he now it's about what worlds do I want him to enter? What worlds do I want to enter? He's going to be my surrogate. I'm not doing criminal investigations anymore, and formally, but I'm going to do the same amount of research I would do as an investigative journalist for each of my books. So I'm really excited about where he's going next.
Other question? Oh, Allison?
Well, looking forward, I'm really curious about whether you see what about the female characters in lots of ways. I have to tell you, there were times when I was reading your book and I couldn't read it before I went to bed because I had nightmares from it. So I thought, well, that's effective. That's effective writing. But I was really especially interested in the character of Hungry, the woman. And I guess I hope she comes back. I hope we get to hear about her again. Maybe I'm challenging you to bring her back, but I'm just curious. Do you see a future for some of the female characters in the book?
I haven't decided. Hungry is tough because I really liked her. I really liked crafting her. There is a advocate in South Africa named Thuli Manansela, who is extraordinary, and she offered an inspiration for that character. And I don't know her; I've just read a lot about her. And the trouble with that is hers is a very South African story, and Clay, I'm going to want him to take on a variety of issues, and so it'll be a challenge to I've been thinking about that too. You know, who can I take with him? And one choice I've already made is that these aren't going to be artificially isolated stories. Clay has a real life, and he's interacting with people, and he also has an ability to work with bad guys as well as good guys to achieve his ends. So it's kind of exciting to know that you can maintain these relationships, and yeah.
Maybe she travels to Washington, D.C. and
Could be. I've heard that happens. Yeah.
Old anyway.
She's right. So, but I mean, we're all people who've read the book, so you know the level of betrayal, and her fiance is killed as a result of his betrayal. So I think that, one of the things Clay does here is he violates a lot of journalistic ethics. And there are rules against working undercover. There are definitely rules against working as a spy. And I skirted a number of rules as a journalist and would definitely do it again. But I got out in time to not pay the cost of it, whereas Clay has been in longer, and I wanted to show that there is a cost, and I wasn't always right as a journalist to come up with a kind of fake identity and things to get into bad people. And Clay does it in a much more advanced way, and I wanted to show that there's a cost to that. So his relationship with Hungry is that cost. Is is that?
He's interesting because he's not completely good, you know. I mean, one thing I was struck by was the layering, I call it layering, that you do in the book, you know, where we see the complexity of him as a character. And I especially liked, and James alluded to this, how we were fed bits of information about his past so that we begin to understand more and more as the book goes forward why he's acting the way he is, you know, the impact that's having on him throughout his life, and how it's determining his behavior in some ways still, even though he's many years away from those events. So,
Yeah, thank you. I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about what protagonists we've encountered in fiction, and kept asking myself, how can I go deeper into his psyche? And I think, again, Le Carre did that well, with Smiley and Lamus, and it was a challenge to me to go even deeper. And, you know, I wanted to reveal things that I feel as an American male are not ever said. And we're all put on these. One of the myths that we're invited into very early in our entertainment-centered culture is this, you know, cowboy kind of violence that is, you know, inculcated at a very early age. You're taught to revere this kind of framework, and I wanted to. I loved writing in the thriller genre with an espionage framework, and then saying, "Screw yourselves with that approach to." I mean, the guys who really get stuff done don't think that way, and we need to think about. Men need to think about themselves differently, and so I wanted to give a guy who showed more, was more vulnerable, I guess.
And I think we care about him because of those vulnerabilities. You know, when we see those, that's part of what draws us in, and for me at least, and made me interested in him as a character and empathetic, you know, as he became more and more complex as the book went along. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it was fun, you know, as you're writing the book, you don't know all this stuff in the beginning. And that test that he does, what's the opposite of that? I do as I'm trying to come up with things. But so part of it's just, oh, what if he were black instead of white kind of thing. But a lot of it is, okay, can I really sit quietly and inhabit this guy, and how might he think about this? And I really enjoyed that.
Could I, if someone else have it, because I have a question I really want to make sure we do, or just want you to talk a little bit about something. And it's something you brought up at the very beginning about the way you wrote for National Geographic is by creating, you know, focusing on the villains. You know, and the two principal villains in this book are unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable in a good way, not unbelievable like what's the matter with what can't this guy write? You know, they're just fabulous characters. So, could you talk a little bit about? I mean, you know, I'm sure the world has 30 guys like Terry Krieger running around, but it just scares the shit out of me that there's even one. You know, and you know, and then Roz is just, you know, what a great, just fabulous. So could you talk about the villains for us?
Sure. Well, I didn't have to stretch imagination too far to come up with Terry Krieger, sadly. I mean, if you took Rupert Murdoch and Eric Prince and melded them together, you'd have a fairly good version of Terry Krieger. And the thing is, those lines are blurring all the time, which is something that, I mean, I didn't want to just, I really wanted to show that, you know, turn major media platforms to simple products.
Brian, you're going in and out. You just sort of, we lost your audio for a minute.
Oh, really? Are we there? How are we doing?
That's
Nothing?
Good.
So I, you know, I looked at what Rupert Murdoch was doing, and what might happen if you gave Murdoch access to weapons in the way that Eric Prince had, and if you gave him a private military, a mercenary wing, which isn't that big a stretch. You know, words have meaning, which is one of the points of the book. And so if words have meaning and you're using those words in a violent way, oppressive way, what if you literally had a military wing? And it kind of all fit together for me. And then Ross Botha, the South African, who's kind of I mean, he's a bad person. But in him, I wanted to try to share something that I have experienced over the years many times. And that is some really reprehensible people can be allies and almost amusingly so, even though they're horrible. They can also be funny. They could be the person that you can count on. If you know, the thing about bad guys is generally you understand where their interests lie and what their greed is, and you can operate in and out of that. You would kind of have an immediate sense of, okay, this is mathematically, this is what you want. And as long as I don't tread in that space, what you also might want is public exposure, publicity, or you might just want to talk to somebody who's from a different, quote, more sophisticated world than, you know, if you're in the underworld, I'm talking to you from sophisticated society or something. And you can have a rapport that way. Good guys are much more treacherous. Their interests are not black and white a lot of the times. It's very gray. You know, a bad guy wants money most of the time. Good guys want all kinds of things. They want a promotion. And they'll throw you under the bus left and right. And I wanted to capture the fact that you can rely on a bad guy sometimes, and whereas the company you keep are all killers. You know, the people around you, your work colleagues, are not reliable. They're not going to help you, and you would make a mistake to think that they have your back because the math isn't there. And so it was really fun to craft a guy and put him on the page, and he is. I mean, you can take shots at the Krieger idea because he's got some imagined elements that I see as possible, but I don't know for a fact there's this person that is doing all those things. Whereas Ross, that guy exists, and I've spent a lot of time on him.
Well, and then of course, one of the great things about Tom Clay is that he totally misses the thing right in front of his face, which is the guy he's traveling with. He just misses the things that most of us would miss because we're granting some sense of cohesion to our world. But I mean, God, that's just really, that whole sequence when that started to go south.
So what I got really excited about, I didn't know that Tension was going to be bad. for a long time. And what I got excited about was, okay, Clay is this very effective undercover investigator, but we all miss, people in our midst. And if that's true, could I create who in his midst could be treacherous? And so I wondered if, so there's that scene on the plane where they get on the plane and they're both bullshitting about a story assignment and this grapefruit, this bowl with these, the story that they worked on together. And what I wanted to do with that was Clay being very proud of himself, building a relationship with a guy in order to use him later, without realizing that this guy was building a relationship with him to manipulate him later. And I don't know that Clay ever fully gets that's what happened to him. He kind of does. Well, he certainly knows the tension's bad and that sort of thing, but I don't know if he realizes for how long he'd been, and at really close range, he'd been manipulated. So that was really fun for me.
Yeah, Larry.
I thought that was one of the great ironies in the book. I was convinced that Clay was more perceptive than most people, could read people better than most people, and then everything blows up in his face, including this trauma of killing this kid that it turned out he didn't kill. So that was a great twist, and I think that's happened to all of us, where we think we're understanding a situation or a person, and then have the irony turn out that that's not the case. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the book.
Thank you. Yeah, that
See,
was.
I think I found it kind of heartbreaking. I mean, I guess I took it really personally. I can't imagine having someone that you really have as a mentor, and even more than a mentor, almost a father figure kind of in a way, and just having them, having it come out that way. I mean, I found it really sad. But I mean, I was really, really surprised, which is great, right? But I found it really sad.
Yeah, I think it is sad. And that technique, with the kid, using the kid, I mean, that was a technique that that's a bunch of these things are manipulative techniques that are used, and I wanted to show, not tell those.
Yeah. But that's a great strategy, which is if you know someone well enough, you can use exactly the right trigger, lay it into them, and then just wait for it to be able to be used when you need to use it. I mean, it's so creepy, and it's great.
Yeah.
The patience it takes to just say, okay, we're going to do this because we're going to need this later. I don't know when, but we're going to put it in there and we're going to see what happens, because I think he'll react in a certain way that we can use. And of course, Clay does. That horrible moment when he finally signs up to be in the CIA, and he says to Edie, I want all of my money to be sent to this, this family. I mean, that's how much he's carrying that. Yeah. And to Nancy's point, I mean, I think it would be sad, sadder if you felt like this guy really did look at Clay as a mentor or as a father figure, but he was playing him from the get-go and just waiting, and that to me is that.
No. Not Clay as the father figure and mentor. The National Geographic,
Edie, his boss.
Sorry. That guy is the father figure and mentor to Clay.
Okay, good.
The other way around.
Okay.
That's who I was talking about.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's sad, I guess.
Well, I thought it was sad.
James
But
is
I'm much more sensitive than you, James Bone.
James is giving the director's perspective.
Sorry.
Usually you have to manipulate a few guys
Sorry,
under
so
you.
I just misinterpreted the whole thing, but that's okay. I loved it anyway. Goodbye.
No, you didn't interpret anything.
No, I don't think you did. Yeah.
Well, this again at Charlotte Smith, I had, as we were having this conversation, about the playing on the vulnerabilities, it struck me that this is a lot like the grooming that you hear about with sexual predators, as they groom vulnerable people. And yet now it's the same thing, though, being applied in a spying context where people are looking to use people and deliberately going out and grooming them. And in Clay's case, then this was going on for years and years and years before they finally, if you will, applied the screws or applied the incentives. I guess the correct analogy to sexual predators would be apply the incentives and the rewards that would come. I mean, is that a strange analogy? Is that what you see going on in the world of spies and other nefarious people?
I think that's bang on. I think I read Malcolm Gladwell did some years ago a profile of a sexual predator, like how that the patience, the grooming of the parents in order to get at the kid for over years, and it was a very creepy story. And I went back to that while I was crafting that aspect of what Edie was doing, because I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly what you have to have, a long-term play, and that, you know, if you read about Russian espionage techniques in this space, they're planting seeds everywhere, all the time. And the idea, they don't expect 90% of them to bear fruit, and they don't need them to. So this is kind of a combination of those two notions. I mean, Edie had a very definite idea. I think he evolved to realize that he could assign a journalist stories that could bring intel. The story itself could make a difference in ways that he profited by, and he could garner intel secretly from those projects in ways that he could profit directly from. He came to understand that over time. He didn't start out as a bad guy, but you know, we live in a competitive world where you're judged by how successful you are. And I could tell you that, you know, as a journalist late in life, unless you're one of a very few people, you are instantly forgotten if your name's not on the page. And he was no longer an award-winning photographer. He was a manager, and I could picture what that would do to a guy, a certain type of guy. And so he had laid these seeds sometime in the past, and without knowing then what fruit they would bear, and he begins to pluck that fruit. Yeah, but I think you're exactly right that it is the predator model.
I was seriously upset to find out he was a bad guy, which I think is a huge strength of your writing. I mean, because I believe that, you know, he was good. And when he turned out to be bad, I was sad and shocked, and that I think is a credit to how you wrote it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think in his case, at the first draft, he was a good guy, and he was the mentor for and I did the opposite.
You're breaking.
Oh,
You're breaking up.
gosh. Man, is that any better?
Check your drone.
I miss my drone. It's drone interference. Yeah, I think in a first draft he was good, and that helped me make him be particularly bad because all the cues I might have inadvertently included were not there, and that made it really powerful. And I've since adopted that as a process to be willing to decide later whether someone is good or bad, and just write them as they come, and that cleans them of tells.
Yeah, yeah, because the tells eventually you have to be so careful with the tells. Yeah, and yeah, I agree. That's great. That's good. That's good
Well,
stuff.
but I find that really interesting because I'm not a writer. I mean, how does that talk about that? I think it's really interesting that you have an initial concept of someone as like whatever, good or something. And then as you write, the character changes and evolves. I mean, can you talk about that?
No, that's what happens. I mean, I think you kind of map out a basic story idea and research it so that I kind of have an idea what these people are like, and then let them go. And my wife and I discuss every day before I get started over breakfast. We talk about where the story is and and sometimes I say I need a couple days before I'm going to bring this to you in a couple of days, and then we'll talk about it. And what if this guy is good, or what if he did this? And it's really a fun way to explore.
So she's sort of your early unofficial editor?
Oh no, she's my early and
she's your reality check.
Well, no, she's an excellent editor. I mean, the work that you see on the page. I mean, I have a great editor in Mark Devaney at Putnam, but he had an easy job to do for the work that Jen did.
Wow.
Okay, I think we're going to have to bring this to a close, unfortunately. We're a little over time at the moment.
Jim, can I ask if Bryan has sold movie rights for this book?
Only if you're interested in purchasing them yourself.
No, but
it's so visual. It's so visual. It seems like the movie would make itself.
Right.
Get on the phone, Larry. No, I haven't. I'm hopeful, but yeah, those rights are available.
But
Okay.
can you tell us when the second one is set to hit the market?
So I'm still writing it. Thank you very much. I will say I'm extremely excited about it. And I think we'll get, if you like this, I think you're going to like the next one more. So.
Could you put a better cover on it?
So there's time. There's time.
I wasn't sure what sort of bookstore James was operating. So when he asked for a copy of the book, I was reluctant. 95% of me thought, oh, good, he has a bookstore. But 5% of me said, what kind of bookstore is this? So no, that was an advanced copy. This is the.
Okay. All right.
Oh, the dog.
The dog is here. She's awake.
We both both lose. Brian and I had a wager what was going to happen first. James was going to swear, the dog was going to bark.
Yep.
And we
See?
both got it wrong.
We did get it wrong.
James, don't kick the dog.
Yes, James.
Okay, Nancy, do you want to talk about the next couple of, first of all, Ryan, thank you. This was great.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah. Thank
We-
you.
And,
Brian, you can just come back to all our book clubs, whether you wrote the book or not, you know.
This is great. I mean, I thank all of you because I really enjoyed your thoughts and questions, and I really appreciate how much thought you've put into the reading. So it's nice. It's the only book club I've done, so I haven't spent any time with a group of readers. It's really special.
So since you haven't finished the book, I could just say that you could visit Bernard's mother and find, you know, and she's the one that taught him everything he knew.
Thank you.
You can bring it back in a little. That's too good of a character to let go.
Yeah.
all right, we got to stop torturing you.
He's thinking. Okay, so for next month, we're totally changing. We're gonna do a nonfiction. It's called The Diary of a Young Naturalist. And this young man, Dara McNulty, is 16 now, and he's on the autism spectrum. His parents were told he wouldn't be able to communicate, and he has written this amazing book where he follows a year he lives in Northern Ireland. And so it's basically, it's like it says, it's his diary of the environment. He's become a very well-known young environmentalist, like Greta. And just a lovely, lovely book. And, you know, with ties in nicely, like with last month's The Seed Keeper and this month with Brian, about how all these books we need to care for this one earth that we have. So we'll do this one next month. And that is, gosh, I should have written that down. It is July 21st. And then in August, we're gonna tell you 2 months in a row here. This is The Shoulder Season that James is holding up by Christina Clancy. Last year, she wrote The Second Home, which we all loved. And this one is fun. This is not an environmental book. This is set at the Playboy Club in Lake Geneva in 1981.
I don't understand. Why is that not an environment? I don't know.
It's an environment. So it's a real fun coming of age kind of story. Lots of 1980s sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it's just a very fun story of this sheltered young woman who somehow ends up at the Playboy Club. And that will be on August 18th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And we have lots of other good events coming along. So
Okay.
hey, if you write a good book, you don't need a fancy cover, James.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
All right. That's it. Game. Thank you all.
Brian.
Thank you all.
Thank
It
you.
was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.